Betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. I felt it wash over me like a cold night breeze, slipping through the cracks of my trust. My heart raced with an urgency I couldn't yet understand. A message not meant for my eyes flashed on her phone. A text, crafted to deceive, weaving a lie that suffocated the truth. Suspicion crept in where love once thrived. I stood there, denial clawing at my mind, but the whispers grew louder. This was more than insecurity. It was the first fracture in a foundation I believed unshakable. I was forced to confront the reality I had resisted. My world shifted beneath me, the solid ground now a treacherous terrain. Calmness wrapped around me like armor. I was losing trust. But this was my turning point. I wouldn't react. I would endure. Beneath the facade, I began to plot. Every silence became a stepping stone towards strategy. She thought she held the power, but with each calculated breath, I fortified my resolve. This was just the beginning. The stage was set, and the game was mine to play. Proof. It glared at me from the notification on her phone, a flash of betrayal too stark to ignore, too painful to embrace. My heart, a metronome of mixed emotions, hammered against my chest. I confronted her in the quiet of our shared space, words pressed on the tip of my tongue like a loaded weapon. What's this about? She deflected effortlessly, sweeping the accusation away with feigned concern. You're overthinking, just a friendly chat. The performance was flawless. It hit me like a cold wave. I stood there, the aggressor in a script I hadn't written. Wounded pride washed over me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the truth hung between us like a ghost, invisible but suffocating. I let the moment settle, each second thick with the weight of denial and half-truths. As her rehearsed victimhood painted her innocence, I felt the anger ebb away, replaced by a numb clarity. Justice felt elusive, a mirage sliding through my fingers. I realized then that I had lost more than trust. She had rewritten our history into a warped reflection. I dropped the pursuit of proof and replaced it with control. I resolved to observe her daily rituals, the way she interacted with friends, how excitement dimmed in her eyes when I was near. I became a shadow in my own life, laying the groundwork for a reckoning that didn't involve chaos. I was in command. I was the architect of my own unraveling. Each day offered me a chance to collect my thoughts like pieces of a puzzle, an image she wouldn't foresee. She would never see it coming. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about mastering the game, where every silent breath I took was a step closer to turning the tide. The stage was set, and soon I would be the one to write the final act. The moment I stopped reacting was the moment I became invisible. I deleted her number, made her a specter in my life. No more breath wasted defending myself to friends. No more explaining ill-fated accusations. Let her tell her tales. I would be the silent observer, watching as she painted her reality, unaware that I had fenced off my heart in impenetrable armor. Each word she spun was a catalyst, feeding the narrative she controlled. My rage transformed into a stark detachment, crystallizing in the cold corners of my mind. I would not scream. I would wait. While she played her part, I began crafting my own narrative, one forged in silence. I methodically gathered data, conversations, observations, subtle inconsistencies. Each day presented opportunities wrapped in unassuming gestures, a misplaced comment here, a flicker of doubt there. I collected evidence like a jeweler selecting the finest stones, each detail adding to the mounting brilliance of my emerging plan. In my mind, I sculpted an image, an architect hidden in the shadows, shaping a structure she wouldn't see until the walls crumbled around her. I refrained from joy or vengeance. Those emotions were chaotic, unpredictable. Instead, I wielded control like a surgeon with a scalpel, poised to extract the truth with precision, whispering strength back to the universe. Behind closed doors, I enhanced myself. I pushed boundaries, professionally, physically, emotionally. Motivation flowed from the depths of betrayal, each drop of anger refueling my ambition. Every deliberate action silenced her narrative a little more, turning the tide unseen. Time became my ally. Every moment passed without punctuation, stretching into a symphony of muted threats and potential. I could sense the whispers fluttering among our acquaintances, a ripple in the water, originating from the truth I would unleash. My silence didn't signify weakness. It was a calculated intermission, building anticipation for the crescendo to come. And in that stillness, I became something new. A man sculpted from silence. A vessel of revenge smoothly forgotten in the echo of her victimhood. She was playing an elaborate game, but I was preparing the board for a masterstroke she would never anticipate. The clock ticked steadily, the sound almost soothing, each second pulling me deeper into the tapestry of my design. I had become a ghost in my own life, observing, planning, built from the silence between us. She toyed with her narrative, playing the victim as if it were her birthright. But I was weaving my own story, hidden in the delicate threads of truth and half-truths unseen. Documenting every slip, every inconsistency. Those whispered lies echoed in the quiet of my mind, illuminating paths she couldn't foresee. I found a thrill in detail. The way she smiled too wide. How her laughter fractured in moments of uncertainty. Conversations morphed into quiet inquiries, acting as my private reservoir of data. I was the architect in the dark. My heart no longer raced. It beat with purpose. I grinned at the thought of her unaware. The foundation I was creating wouldn't just be built from betrayal, but reinforced by careful strategy. While she flitted about, joyous and oblivious in her performance. Relationships with our friends began to shift, veiled glances exchanged behind her back, whispers of doubt gently sowing seeds in fertile ground. It was delicious, her charisma growing frayed at the edges, control slipping through her fingers as the truth lingered, waiting. And all I had to do was remain steadfast. Let her stories fester like a wound. Let the infection of doubt breed. Time, my patient ally, unraveled her narrative further. I watched as she cursed the darkness while I thrived in it. Each moment passed unnoticed, a prelude to what lay ahead. The illusion of her victimhood would soon surface, cracking under the weight of scrutiny she thought she could bear. The first dominoes would fall soon, and I would only need to lean slightly to initiate the cascade. She thought herself untouchable, but I prepared a path, guiding the course toward her unraveling without a sound. The architecture of her demise, crafted in the shadows, awaited the right conditions to reveal itself. And as I stood back, detached yet thoroughly engaged, I marveled at how quietly revenge could unfold. The echoes of her lies began to reverberate, a symphony of faltering notes that caught in the throats of those around her. I watched with a detached satisfaction as she waxed poetic about her perceived injustices, her voice rising like a crescendo, betraying the cracks forming in her facade. She had mastered victimhood, But what she didn't realize was that overplaying her hand would invite scrutiny into her downfall. I observed the subtle shifts, hesitation in her words, the hesitation of glances exchanged among our friends, whispers that lingered, threads unraveling in the fabric of her carefully crafted narrative. I leaned back, a watcher in the shadows, as they debated the reliability of her tales. Seeds of doubt sprouted quietly, and I let it fester, alone, unchallenged in my silence. Soon, her stories grew sloppier, each repetition like a fraying rope tugging at the corners of my mind. The inconsistencies began to pile up like discarded drafts of a script that no longer resonated. Each exaggerated tale dragged the specter of her truth further into twilight. Eyes that once sparkled with sympathy shifted towards me, curiosity flickering in their depths. They were now watching her closely, wondering who the true victim was. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest, but I knew better than to reveal my hand. Timing was everything. I stayed quiet, letting the whisper of her unraveling grow into a murmur, creating ripples she couldn't see. She still believed she was on solid ground. Little did she know the ground beneath her was shifting, the cracks spreading like spider webs beneath her feet. The anticipation wrapped around me, leaving me imbued with a sense of power that both thrilled and calmed. With every falsehood she spun, I tightened the noose of consequence, letting it hang there in the air, waiting for its moment to constrict. The hunt was on, and she was unaware of her impending entrapment. In the echo chamber of her deceit, the truth was waiting, biding its time, eager to emerge. And when it did, it would settle not like a storm, but like a whisper turned into a roar, precise and undeniable. I smiled, unseen, relishing the silence that lingered between us. The stage was still set. The game was still mine. She just hadn't realized she had already lost. The weight of silence in my life had become a comforting cloak, wrapping around me as I scoured my world for opportunities to level up. I was burning to rebuild, body, mind, finances, but the light of my newfound resolve was dimmed by an unsettling development. A slip in the coffee shop, a casual conversation overheard, set within the mundane everyday life was a complication I hadn't anticipated. "Did you hear what Emily said? About you?" Whispers floated around me, veiling the intended message in metaphorical fog. That name, once innocent, now struck like a blade. She had allowed curiosity to slip from her lips, spreading doubt as easily as seeds in fertile soil. I had entrusted my campaign to shadows, but one careless word had illuminated my presence in a way I could hardly control. Panic was the enemy now. Precision was my weapon. I could feel the adrenaline tightening, every pulse urging me to react. Instead, I took a step back, recalibrating my approach like a knife sharpened against the whetstone of strategy. Let her walk this path of destruction. I would maneuver around it, predicting her every misstep. Observing was more crucial than ever. I watched her interact with those same friends, witnesses to her tales. Their laughter, once a haunting echo, now surfaced as a discordant note on a symphonic stage. The rhythm of my plan faltered for an instant, but I tuned in to the pulse of the moment. Collecting every word spoken, assessing their implications, the danger had morphed from miscalculation to opportunity. In that coffee shop, I sat unmoved, a figure at the edge of her narrative, the architect of my destiny. The game was still mine. I would use this twist, this unintended disruption, to steer the tide against her. With each calculated breath, I continued to build my fortress of serenity, threading my thoughts like the delicate fibers of a spider's web, each strand reinforcing my control. She believed she was in command, unaware that her overconfidence would be the anchor of her downfall. The memories of betrayal had transformed into a silent guardian, urging me to bide my time. Her fear, her arrogance would soon collide, and in that moment, I would not merely remain, I would rise. As I sat there, the whispers faded away, leaving only the pulse of calculated anticipation. The discord in her storytelling would not merely serve to fracture her facade. It would mark the beginning of her unraveling, each lie poised to unspool before an audience. I simply had to wait for the right moment to strike, a moment that would be neither loud nor chaotic, but rather as surgical as I had envisioned. Patience brimmed beneath my surface, the pulse of time humming in tandem with my resolve. The long game had deeper breaths than I anticipated, but still, momentum shifted with the certainty of night yielding to day. I became the calm within the storm. Her echoes no longer stung but served to fortify my emerging plans, each contradiction sharpening my resolve. I was the darkness slipping back into the shadows, unseen but unwavering, a predator waiting for the perfect opportunity to pounce. The world held its breath, the tension palpable as I navigated through the intricate dance of manipulation and observation. She thought her laughter carried across the room like a sweet melody, blissfully unaware of the discordant notes creeping in from the edges. Each day I spent in her wake, watching her weave lies like a delicate tapestry. I felt the power shift beneath us. The plan was evolving, adapting like a predator in the night. One calculated truth was all it would take to shatter the illusion she had so carefully constructed. I had become a ghost in her life, moving through shadows and sunlight with the ease of a seasoned observer, gathering everything into a mental archive, a treasure trove of clarity amidst her chaos. Then it happened. A seemingly innocuous moment, one I had meticulously engineered, presented itself. I was at a gathering, my expression calm, eyes steady, when I casually dropped the single truth, perfectly styled, subtle yet undeniable. "Did you hear what she said about us last week?" The room paused, the laughter deflating as connections rapidly formed. Conversations halted, tension threading between us like an electric charge, a collective intake of breath. A witness, right on cue, picked up the thread of my insinuation, their eyes wide with surprise. I could almost hear the gears turning, the slow realization crystallizing like frost on glass. Her mask began to slip, the cracks widening with every word left unspoken, every moment of doubt I had sown. Her laughter turned brittle, the edges of her smile fraying as she instinctively attempted to dismiss the murmurs building around us. I leaned back, a spectator in this unfolding drama, the power dynamic shifting like the tides. No longer the aggressor, I felt the satisfaction of deliberate control settle in my chest, heavy and grounding. This was not chaos. This was computation. Every reaction was measured, every emotion stifled. The hurt I intended would be precise, like a surgeon cutting through flesh with unwavering focus. I had built my weapons in silence, and now they were taking form, ready to strike where it mattered most. The subtlety of my silence spoke volumes louder than any scream she could muster. As their eyes flickered back to me, seeking understanding while veering away from her turmoil, I reveled in the stillness. Justice was a quiet storm, building momentum behind closed doors, and I was the architect, laying the foundation of her demise while she still believed herself unassailable. The perfect strike, delivered with a smile. I treated it as the beginning of a long, unfolding chapter of reckoning. The anticipation in the air buzzed with potential, each whispered doubt feeding the narrative I directed. My heart no longer raced. It thrummed in time with the reframing of our shared reality, a reality in which I had regained the upper hand while she clung desperately to her unraveling story. With each moment, I reclaimed what was lost, not with the tremor of desperation, but with the calm of mastery. The silence between us was no longer an absence of sound. It was the loudest proclamation of the shift creeping through the room. The stage was not merely set, it was collapsing beneath the weight of her deception, as one truth after another took the pervasive hold of the narrative. And in this quiet chaos, I felt myself emerging, stronger, sharper, and undeniably in control. She played the victim, but I was the meticulous craftsman of her unmaking, moving with purpose and precision until the final act arrived and the curtain dropped, leaving her alone amidst the ruins of her performance. I smiled, for I was still in the game, and the end was finally in sight. The cracks in her facade began to splinter, the slow unraveling of her carefully crafted performance shifting myths into whispers of truth. I watched from the shadows, a silent predator as the world around her spiraled. Her laughter, once a melodic tune, now echoed with the harsh dissonance of doubt. Friends who once buoyed her with blind faith began to retreat, their unsure glances like distant storm clouds building on the horizon. It was beautiful in its chaos, like the tension building before the first crack of thunder. "Emily seems different lately," I heard one of them murmur, their voice low but laced with concern. It was a small chime, but to me it sounded like the starting gun of a race I had already won. The ground beneath her began to quake, her confidence fraying as uncertainty seeped into every interaction. She danced on the precipice, wearing her victimhood like a worn-out cloak, oblivious to the danger roiling beneath her feet. Every carefully placed word, every meticulous oversight reeled her in closer, wrapping around her like shadows tightening their grip. I felt no glee at her entrapment, only a cold satisfaction. A predator doesn't revel in the hunt. It relishes the calculated precision of the impending strike. The tension in the air thickened, a canopy of silence gathering above my head, and I felt alive within the anticipation. This was justice unfolding, an emotionless execution orchestrated by unwavering strategy. I had positioned myself as the calm at the eye of the storm, while she flailed against the tempest of her own lies. Each day brought the crescendo closer, the whispers weaving together into a tapestry that would soon envelop her entirely. And still, she claimed innocence. "I don't understand why they're saying those things," she lamented, her voice rising in desperation as our friends dared to question her integrity. But I remained silent, carefully tucking away each inconsistency, every shaky alibi. I was the architect, and this was my blueprint, the extended moment before the curtain would drop. Soon, the last stitch would pull, unraveling the fabric of her deceit. I lingered in that quiet space, feeling the pulse of time thrum against my chest. Her mask would fall away, a slow motion collapse, revealing the hollow core of her cowardice. And as I watched her dance precariously on the edge of chaos, I knew the storm was almost upon her. She could feel the wind shift, the air hung heavy with possible change, but she couldn't see me waiting in the wings, poised to deliver the final blow. The predator circling in silence, while she floundered unaware. Soon, she would be left exposed and vulnerable, with nowhere to hide but within the swirling shadow of her own destruction. There was no joy in this impending outcome, no thrill in my heart, just an icy delight in the precision of retribution. I would not shape her fall with antagonism. I would watch without comment as the stage vanished beneath her feet. All she had built would collapse, and I would remain, a silent witness to the justice meticulously crafted in the absence of sound. The silence weighed heavy in the air, thick with anticipation, my heart steady, my breath measured. I leaned against the cool wall, the golden light from the street lamp catching the edges of the shadows, outlining my resolve. In this game, it was all about precision, about the calm before the storm, and tonight I felt like a sniper lining up the perfect shot. Then her phone buzzed. It was subtle and almost unnoticed, but I caught the tremor and the flicker of her glance. The text had arrived, clean and calculating, remnants of the lies she spun around her reality. I was ready. A cousin of hers reached out that evening, an olive branch extended in mild confusion. "I can't believe what they're saying about you," they said, the words coated in a veneer of false concern. "I thought we knew who you were." An apology. And yet how many layers of betrayal lay beneath it? As I nodded thoughtfully, the pieces clicked into place, a moment of clarity piercing through the haze of my grief. Each thread of her deception was now unraveling. The truth echoed louder than her excuses, revealing the flaws in the fabric she had so meticulously woven. The whispers I had planted, the observations shared discreetly within our circle, had taken root. She was becoming the architect of her own demise, stumbling through a forest of mirrors reflecting the echoes of her lies. The satisfaction I felt was tempered with sorrow, the realization that revenge was as much a dissection of the self as it was of the enemy. I was no longer simply hunting her down. I was witnessing a reality in which I, too, was altered. Each lie downed her walls a little further, but what she didn't grasp was that the mirage of victimhood now shuddered beneath the weight of scrutiny. My voice remained unbroken, my presence an unyielding shadow, allowing the quiet tension to build. I thought of all the whispers I had exchanged with others, friends who now regarded her with a cautious faith, unpicking the threads of her narrative. They had begun to see not who she was, but who she pretended to be. And soon, the stage would be bare, and she would be left stranded, without an audience for the performance she desperately clung to. As I withdrew into the stillness, I prepared myself for the next move. There was no thrill of chaos needed, only the relentless calm of execution. Just as a sniper remains still after the pull of the trigger, I would wait. Wait until the final echoes shattered her facade, when her world splintered, collapsing under its own weight, leaving her to confront the reality she once bent to fit her narrative. In that moment, as those around her began to turn, I felt not elation nor animosity, just a profound clarity. This was not vengeance. It was the conclusion of a well-rehearsed play. No fireworks, no grand gesture, just the precise and surgical removal of an intrusion that had fragmented my life. I would let nature take its course, my silence an unseen hand pushing her into the abyss of her own making. And where once I had loomed large, a shadow now faded into the background as she spiraled into uncertainty. Justice would not be swift, nor would it be wrathful. It would be an execution drawn out over time, cold and merciless, until the curtain finally fell, leaving me standing not in triumph, but in a quiet understanding of what was lost, and what could never be regained. The thrill of the game was in the waiting, and for her, the end was a whisper away. The moment was approaching, and all that was left was to remain patient and watch as the final act unfolded. The air crackled with a tension I'd cultivated, each moment charged like an unspoken dare. I stood at the threshold of my own ascension, feeling the weight of silent anticipation settle upon my shoulders, my heart steady and resolute as I prepared to deliver the final blow. The groundwork I had painstakingly laid was crafted from the echoes of her lies, and now the culmination of my long game was primed to unfurl. The notifications were no longer whispers buzzing in the background. They were screams trapped beneath the surface, ready to break free. We stood amongst friends, our breaths mingling, the warmth of their camaraderie like a cauldron simmering at just the right temperature. And there she was, feigning ease, the embodiment of manufactured grace, unaware that I was the true conductor of this symphony about to reach its fevered crescendo. "Did you hear?" I slipped the truth in as if it were a mere afterthought. "Emily's been distancing herself, hasn't she?" A flicker of uncertainty ignited in her eyes as I glanced pointedly at a mutual friend, a witness eager to unravel her charade. The laughter stuttered and paused, eyes darting between us, confusion shadowing their captive expressions. Her smile strained, a brittle mask cracking under the pressure of scrutiny. "What are you talking about?" she deflected, but the glimmer of panic etched itself into her features, a flame igniting where there had been only smoke. I leaned back slightly, my expression unyielding and calm, allowing the ensuing murmurs to spiral into an arch of doubt, holding the silence like a weapon. This was the space I had crafted, a void of clarity where fabrications began to twist against her. I watched as the allegiances she took for granted began to shake, like a house of cards from which one pivotal piece had been removed. Each lie she spun had multiplied, and now they tethered her to an unraveling truth, and I was the unwitting architect of her demise. A ripple of uncertainty cascaded through the group, murmurs evolving into questioning glances that turned to me and back to her, seeking a narrative, a thread of reality amid the impending collapse. "Those stories don't add up anymore," another voice chimed in, steady and clear, striking a further blow. "We've noticed things, Emily." The warmth surrounding her evaporated, her panic bubbling to the surface, but I remained silent, watching her terror unfold like a nearing storm breaching the oh-so-quiet sanctuary. She was cornered by her intricacies, the contradictions she had sewn into the fabric of her identity. The moments stretched, the truth became a strain within her grasp, and I stared deep into her eyes. There was no pleasure there, only a calm satisfaction that coursed through me like a cool darkness, so unlike her searing chaos. I was not here to celebrate her demise. I was merely an observer, an unflinching witness to the final act of a play I had directed from the shadows. Justice doesn't shout. It stands cloaked in silence, and in that silence, I maintained my dominion. No confrontations, no outbursts, just the quiet assurance that the tide had irrevocably turned. The whispers of doubt grew louder. Her desperate attempts at restoration flailed around her like birds trapped in a net, and I let the silence speak for itself. The absence of support she once relished turned into a void, leaving her marveling at the realization that her splendid performance was facing an encore she had never anticipated. I felt the structure of her world teeter on the brink. It trembled under the pressure of every whispered truth I had sprinkled about like breadcrumbs. I had become the storm assembling beneath the surface, unraveling the lies she clutched to her chest. each denial fraying and fading against the backdrop of a growing clarity. As her confidence collapsed, so too did the facade of power she had cultivated piece by piece, untangling in the face of collective insight. Her panic churned into desperation, while still I remained steady, watching her grasp at straws, only to find the air grow denser, colder around her. The curtain was dropping. The players were no longer on stage but cowering in the ruins of her artistry. My silence echoed in her struggle, a powerful honesty illuminating the lies she had spun. No congratulations needed. Ultimately, it was not about her humiliation or my triumph. It was about the inevitable conclusion to a story she had thought she could write unchallenged. Letting the final silence cradle her, I stepped back into the shadows. The stage was abandoned, and alone, she faced the remnants of her own making. The real collapse had come not with chaos, but with the quiet emergence of truth. I had delivered my revenge, and satisfaction swelled within me. Not for her suffering, but for the victory of whispered justice, cold and precise as glass breaking underfoot, shattering yet leaving no trace of smoke. I stood at the threshold of my existence, a vast expanse of uncertainty stretching before me. The air felt different now, stripped of tension and thick with clarity. Moments before, I had breathed in the storm clouds of deceit and betrayal, felt the pressure build as the winds of manipulation swirled around me. But now? Now the storm had passed, leaving behind a stark stillness, the aftermath of a reckoning. I turned my back on the rubble of her lies, a haunting melody of silence now resonating in the empty space we once shared. Familiar streets stretched out, devoid of the weight they had once carried. Every echo of our laughter had been replaced by whispers of uncertainty. The words we exchanged now mere phantoms drifting in the breeze. I stood at the edge of a new beginning, yet all I felt was the emptiness where something vibrant had once thrived. The game was over. I hadn't scorched the earth. Rather, I had rewired the very storm that swept through our lives, striking only where it was needed. Each action I took had been deliberate, every moment a carefully curated brushstroke in the larger canvas of our shared history. I had built my fortress of silence and let her implode upon her own hypocrisies, painfully, slowly, quietly. Was it worth it? In moments of reflection, I traced the scars of the past, reconsidering the cost of my peace. Each instance of her deception, her feigned innocence, pieces of my heart tethered to the chaos of her creation. Yet now, those threads had snapped, leaving me illuminated by the quiet clarity of acceptance. I forgave myself for feeling, for exposing my vulnerability. I had not let her bend me again. I stood resolute. Footsteps faded behind me, the distance growing with every step. The road stretched out like a promise, a liberation I had never anticipated. I could hear the ghost of her desperation echo in the distance, but I refused to look back. With each stride, I tasted freedom on my lips, a sweet reprieve from the bitterness of betrayal. Behind closed doors, I had crafted my own truth. I had forged strength from anguish and sculpted resilience from surrender. The memories of who I was when I entered the battle faded into the dust, giving way to an undeniable power unveiled by the completion of my arc. No grand gestures. This was a solitary victory carved in the silence of a self reclaimed. Locked doors stood resolute in my wake, barriers to old agony, sepulchres for bygone chaos. That life, that chapter, it had closed with the softest of clicks, leaving me standing with the echo of the past still rippling behind me. I was no longer bound by the legacy of our entwined realities. I was now an architect of my own existence. The reflection staring back in the mirror held no remnants of her lies. I had become something new, a being sharpened by the silence, unmarred by the scream of betrayal. I walked on, propelled by unyielding resolve. Each step was a reminder of my journey, a passage through tangled webs, through the chaos of someone else's narrative, and into a quiet knowing of my own design. Revenge was not about her. It was about me. It was about the power I had reclaimed. It was about the pain I had transmuted into a launch pad for new beginnings. And as I ventured farther beyond the shadows of my past, I felt the soft glow of possibility warm my skin. I was free. The silence enveloped me like a protective cloak. I could breathe deeply, unshackled, struck by the realization that in this vast expanse of open road, I was not just moving on, I was moving forward. The ghost of her victimhood lingered behind, but I, unbroken, stepped into the light of a future entirely my own.